Hi, good morning to everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, or whatever time it is, wherever you're watching. Welcome to Old Women Who Write. I'm very pleased this morning to have, or today, to have a guest named Glenda Booth. And Glenda and I have never met, so we're just meeting as you're meeting us. But Glenda's a freelance writer. She's based in Northern Virginia, and her work has appeared in many, many newspapers, publications of all kinds of sorts. She also, I know, had an article published in Ms. Magazine at one point, which is exciting to me. That's my icon, Ms. Magazine. And matter of fact, she was a founder of in 1970 of the Northern Virginia Now National Organization for Women. I was a founder in Alabama in the 70s of the Alabama chapter of Now. So we have that in common. Glenda is very successful as a journalist, but this wasn't her first crack at a career. And so I want to first, before we talk about what you write and why you write it, talk about yourself. Like you grew up, you're a total Virginia person, am I right? You grew up there, you lived there. Have you always lived there?
Yes, I grew up in Southwest Virginia near Roanoke, and all my family is there. And then I went to Longwood College, which is in Central Virginia, and I got a bachelor's degree, and then I went to the University of Virginia and got a master's degree.
Wow.
And from there, I moved to Northern Virginia, so I'm in the Washington suburbs. I live very close to Mount Vernon, George Washington's home. And so the answer to your question is yes, I have always lived in Virginia.
Wow, that's that's unusual in this day and age.
Yeah, probably, especially here. Yeah.
Yeah. What you worked at a totally different job, although it involved writing, a totally different job for a lot of years. Say what it is, what it was.
I worked in for almost 28 years. I worked in the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. I worked for several different members of Congress and a committee. And I did, in Washington jargon, what's called legislative work, which means writing bills and getting bills passed or trying to stop the bills that you don't support. And it was a wonderful career. It's very hard work. It's very high pressure, but it's a very challenging work because I think of it as, first of all, a lot of people would describe it as, quote, political. I didn't see it that way. To me, it was public service. I was working for, in the last 8 years, the people of California, because I worked for Senator Dianne Feinstein. And so it was public service.
Glenda, can you sit back a little bit because your voice gets muffled when you get near the microphone? Thank you.
Sure. And I viewed it as problem solving. So you just think of a problem. You know, we've got like these school shootings in the news, or it's expanding Medicare to cover hearing aids, or solving the problems in Belarus, or how to prevent pollution from automobiles. You know, you have to take on problems like that and find a solution, and then you put that solution in the form of a bill, and then you've got to get that bill passed. So you have to develop a legislative strategy to pass the bill. So it's very challenging work. It's very rewarding work. It's very hard work, but I enjoyed it very much.
It sounds as though part of it is a research and writing task, and the other part, when you say to get it passed legislatively, did that involve more writing, or what did that part involve?
Well, the job does involve writing. I mean, writing a bill is a very specialized kind of writing, which and there are people who specialize in crafting legislative language
Mm.
that can help you. But we would, in that kind of job, you have to write a bill summary, you have to write a statement explaining the bill. Somebody usually might write a press release, something like that. But it does involve a lot of research and a lot of writing, and you have to be a quick study sometimes and a quick writer. But yes, now, and I also wrote some articles for various publications. I wrote many, like we call them floor statements, which is when the elected official would go to the full House or the full Senate and make a speech, basically, explaining a bill or defending a bill or explaining a vote or whatever. So none of that writing was under my name. So because I had to write for the person I was working for.
Yes.
So it was all under their names.
Right. I remember when I was in law school and taking the very first class, which was writing class. And I discovered a difference. I had assumed that research and writing was you research and then you write the results. What did you find? More like scientific research, what do you observe, what you see? And then it took me a while in law school to realize that, no, what I was really writing was from a point of view. Okay. And that's different. You can take the research and then
you frame
interpret or frame it. Yeah, that's the best way to say it. And that was new to me, and it's really the base of all advocacy writing.
Right.
Is you have your point of view and you have the facts.
Right.
And so, did that ever give you issues in your writing? If you say, wait a minute, this is what I'm seeing in the research, but this is what seems to be desired by whoever I'm working for. Did that ever happen to you?
I'm not sure what you're asking me.
Which came first, the political point of view or the research? And which did you need to follow?
Well, the research, because you've got to find a solution to whatever problem you're trying to address, and then you can decide what arguments you want to use to defend it or explain it.
I see. Yeah.
So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Did you like the people you worked for?
I did, very much so. Yes. So I couldn't have worked for people I didn't respect.
Right.
So I did.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good. Do you want to share with us who you worked with, or no?
No, I don't mind. It's a matter of public record. So,
yeah.
I started with a Virginia.
Back up. Back
I'm
up.
sorry?
Back up.
I'm sorry. I started with a Virginia congressman who represented this area where I live. His name was Herbert Harris. And then I worked for over 10 years with a Pennsylvania congressman from the Pittsburgh area named Doug Walgren, and also during that period for the House Energy and Commerce Committee. He chaired a subcommittee. And then at the end, I worked for Senator Dianne Feinstein from California.
Oh my, yeah, impressive.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
All right. So when you retired from that job, officially retired, did you already have in mind what you wanted to do next?
Not really.
What were your thoughts at the time? Do you remember? I know. I asked these kind of questions.
No, I mean, I know some people developed, grand schemes for their retirement, there were several things going on, but my father had passed away and my mother was not doing well, and she was 5 hours away. So I was feeling increasing pressure to be supportive of her. And so so I really didn't want to get too involved. I wanted to maintain some flexibility to help. Now I've always been involved in my community as well in various ways. And so, I knew that I would continue some of that. And I've always been especially interested in conservation issues, and a member of many different conservation organizations.
Right.
And so I'll come back to that in a minute, but I wrote a letter to the editor of a local weekly newspaper about an issue that I was concerned about, that I was not happy about. So anyway, so the editor called me up and said, "That's a great letter. We want to publish it as an op-ed. Is that okay?" And I said, "Sure, that's okay."
Yeah.
So they did. And so then they invited me to write more articles. So I just started writing, in a few cases. In some cases, they would give me an assignment. In other cases, I would just come up with the idea. And this was a little local paper. I mean, you don't do this to make money, but, that's sort of what got me going. And then I took a class in travel writing. And I really enjoyed that class, and it was taught by a Washington Post travel writer. And then I joined an organization.
I can't hear you. You've got to back up.
I joined an organization of freelance writers, and started going to some of their, I guess they called them seminars. They were not webinars. They're in-person sessions talking about writing. They'd make presentations on billing or on framing an issue or dealing with editors, whatever, all that whole range. So that's sort of how I got going. And
I see.
One of the important things, in with that organization and also with travel writing classes, is how to write pitches and how to pitch your idea to an editor.
Yeah.
That was totally new to me. I'd never done anything like that.
I am at this moment in the same spot where you were all that time ago, because I'm writing a memoir, and it's made up of, well, it doesn't matter what it's made up of, but I have to pitch it. I went to a writing class on Zoom, and I got to pitch it to 3 different agents. So I had to learn, how you do pitches.
Right. It's hard.
Yes, it's very, very specific.
What would catch the editor's attention?
Yeah, exactly.
And what does this editor care about? And you've got to do it very concisely, because they're not going to spend a lot of time reading it, plowing through something.
Right. That's right.
You can spend hours on working on a 50-word pitch.
Right.
100-word pitch.
The elevator pitch.
Yeah. Right.
Yep. Wow. Okay. So you start on this new career, and in the beginning, did it naturally evolve that you had, well, I'll call clients, or people who wanted you to write for them, or did you have to, how did it evolve?
That's a good question. I approached the publications mostly. More recently, another local weekly newspaper here in Northern Virginia asked me to write for them. So, but when I got started, I after taking those classes and being around other freelancers, and I sort of built up my confidence, and then so I started doing more pitches.
Gotcha. So. Yeah, I'm asking because on this website, Old Women Who Write, I've interviewed authors, mostly authors who write books. And or even in one case, someone who wanted to write a book and had a life worth writing about, but hadn't been able to get it going. But I've never interviewed a journalist, and I've always been curious, and I think people who are watching this would be curious about how you got jobs, so it's a little like friends who become contractors for the federal government or for whatever, where they always seem to be out pitching what it is they do and how they could be useful but you seem to be indicating that eased off for you as time has gone on, that you don't have to
eased
off. You don't have to work as hard at getting work.
No, because now I've gotten established with several different publications, and they know my work. They know that I meet deadlines and that I understand their, approach, their priorities. So no, not. I'm not saying I don't ever do it. I did one 2 weeks ago that I pitched to a magazine that I've never written for. Of course, I haven't heard anything back. So you have to be prepared for that too, because
Do you? I've noticed. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
No, go ahead. You go ahead.
I've noticed that you have two very distinct types of writings that you do, and one I will just call the interview with an individual,
like profiles,
and the other is writing on topics and I know for you, the environment is the big one for you. But talk to for me for a minute about interviews. Years ago, I did a radio show. I've done several radio shows, but this one was for a local radio station. And I had the early morning ghetto hour to fill. And it was involved with interviewing like every passing sailor, it felt like, anybody who came through town, anybody who was having a bazaar the following Sunday, I interviewed. Is yours that I mean, how do those kind of things come up, those interviews? Because I noticed you had an interview with the woman who made the best, wasn't apple pie.
Sweet potato pies,
Sweet potato pie.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Interviews with people who are retiring from their jobs.
Right.
How do those come about? Is that different?
Well, mostly, I think most of those are for the Beacon newspapers, and they're published in Washington, D.C., Baltimore, and Richmond, Virginia areas. The Richmond one is called 50 Plus. They're directed at people over 50. Their editors specifically want articles profiling people over 50 doing interesting things.
Oh, I see.
So that's their, shtick. And so I, in most cases, I find those people and pitch the idea to the editors.
I see.
In a few cases, there was one like a children's book editor that they gave me as an assignment. But anyway, so that's probably most of them are for those publications. And
right. There are two publications that I found online for you, or two pieces. I never know what to call them. Two pieces.
Right.
Is that
articles?
Yeah, that involves civil rights. And I'm sure there are more, but I only saw two. One is the piece you did on the early feminists, what they went through, the brave women. And the other was on school desegregation in Virginia. Yeah. What is that an interest of yours also? Civil rights?
Yes. Well, having grown up in Virginia, I went to segregated public schools. And so I saw, personally saw the harm of that, and then the struggle. Virginia has a very unpleasant, I guess, history of resisting school desegregation, and public officials who that was their mantra, unfortunately. But I experienced all of that, and so frankly, I don't remember how I came upon this organization, but it's a group of mostly academics in Virginia who are documenting the desegregation of Virginia schools. And they're actually collecting and looking at like school board minutes and anything they can find. It's not just like, and they're looking at newspapers as well, which was of course, the media in those days, but they're looking at all kinds of documents. And so then also back in the 70s, as you mentioned, I was a co-founder of Northern Virginia Now, the First Now chapter in Virginia. And I got pretty involved in that then until I had got my first job in the House of Representatives. But somewhere along the way, I started learning about the suffragist battles. And then an organization formed called the Turning Point Suffragist Memorial Association. And this group, not all women, mostly women though, wanted to raise money to build a memorial, a suffragist memorial. And they wanted to build it near where I live.
Yes.
Near a town called Lorton.
Yeah.
Because 30 some women were jailed there at the Occoquan workhouse for peacefully protesting on the White House sidewalk, trying to convince Woodrow Wilson to support an amendment to the US Constitution giving women the right to vote. They were treated rather brutally in jail. Anyway, so the good news is that whole effort succeeded, and the memorial opened this past May.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yep.
And it's in Lorton.
And it's
is
near
the prison still in Lorton Prison? I know.
No, the prison was sold to the county, and it's now mostly an arts center.
Oh my goodness.
And the work, but there's guard towers, sort of loom over the place. And the Occoquan workhouse, the prison, is no longer there. But that is why the site was chosen. And
I see.
So I have written several articles about that memorial. It's and especially this last spring when it actually opened.
Wow. Are you familiar with what's called the Women's Party House? Not a party house, the Women's Party, which dates from that era.
Yeah, the National Women's Party. Yeah, I've written
Washington D.C.
I wrote an article, and maybe two, I can't remember, about women's suffragist sites in Washington D.C.
Yeah,
and there's probably, my article included, I don't know, that, which is now owned by the National Park Service, and and 5 or 6 others. So
yeah,
there's I don't know if you've heard of Cokie Roberts. You remember Cokie Roberts?
Sure, I do.
Yeah, well, her daughter, whose name is it Rachel? I'm sorry, her last name is Roberts. But anyway, she's sort of become an expert on this topic, and she she leads tours of women's suffrage sites.
Oh, that's
So,
fascinating. I'm
yeah,
going to do that next time I'm in DC.
yeah,
I had
yeah,
a friend
should.
back in the day who lived in Alabama, but she would come to DC, and she would stay. You could then stay overnight for 2, 3, 4 nights in the National Women's Party house.
Oh, oh,
And so she could stay in Lucy, what's her name?
Burns.
No. Well, anyway, some of the well-known
Uh-huh.
suffragists
Right,
from then,
right.
the
Uh-huh.
suffragists. You could stay in their bedrooms, and you could see
Oh,
all the locks they had on their doors because they were,
oh,
threatened
yeah.
all the time.
It's quite a story. I
Um,
mean,
yeah.
it's described as like the biggest civil rights movement in our history because it
Hmm.
enfranchised, half the
Right.
population.
Right.
And those
Wow.
women were very courageous, and
Yes, they were.
they were ridiculed, and so, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Okay. All right. But here's what I know. Your true love is the environment. Tell me about why.
yeah, that I think I attributed a lot of it to my grandparents because I would spend my summers with them on their farm down in Southwest Virginia. And I did that from about age 4 to 14. And
Hmm.
I guess it was my mother's solution to childcare, but,
Yeah.
but anyway, and I spent most of that time outdoors and, roaming
And
the,
Southwest Virginia is very beautiful.
yeah, and roaming
My
the
memory.
hills and valleys and the woods and
Yeah.
streams and, all of that. And of course, people who farm live close to the land and depend on the land. And I don't know, it just gave me a real appreciation, I guess, for our natural resources.
Hmm.
And then working in the Congress, I worked on education policy, healthcare policy, and environmental policy largely. And of all of those, I enjoyed the environmental policy the most.
Yeah.
And they say that the theology, it's not the right word, the doctrine of every religion starts with taking care of the earth. And that, and to me, it's I won't say it's a religion, but I feel strongly about it that we can do a better job of be better stewards of our environment and that our survival depends on it. And climate change is just, reemphasizing that.
Yes.
So, so I enjoy learning about it and I enjoy writing about it. And so I guess that's the answer.
Yeah. It's a good
It's
answer.
hard. It's hard.
Yeah. Yes, it's very, very hard because
It's hard to, I don't know, write about it in a way that is convincing, I guess, to some people. I don't know, but and fortunately I have several editors that see it as a priority. And, a lot of publications covering what's happening in the environment is not
right.
top of the list, and
Right.
understandably, I mean, especially our print publications are under so much stress these days,
Yeah.
some of them are struggling to survive, so.
Right. Right. And I know that it also can be depressing because it almost seems like it's preserve the world we were born into or make money. That money is or
Yeah, right,
the desire for money, the greed for
right.
money, is
yeah.
directly opposed to seems like all the principles of conservation.
Well, there's definitely that conflict, and
Back up, please. Back up.
There's definitely that conflict, and that's
Yeah.
partly why we, like in the early 70s, there were so many important federal conservation laws enacted, like the Clean
Yes,
Water Act, Clean Air Act, and EPA was created. I mean, because the private sector had, well, I mean, I don't want to sort of lay
I know you
blanket
don't want to be bashing, but
critical, but you know, they were polluting the air and the rivers, and you know,
right,
and so, you know, so they had to be required to meet certain standards and
right,
regulations. So
right. Yeah. I think it's very difficult. I mean, when you're working for a cause, whether it is the environment or women's rights or whatever, it's really important that you be able to envision a good outcome,
mm-hmm,
as being somewhere, even if it's small, within the realm of possibility,
mm-hmm,
and my feeling with the environmental issues is
mm-hmm,
that I'm not sure that's, it's more of a hang on by your fingernails, preserve what is, rather
mm-hmm.
than moving toward a vision of what could be, you know,
Mm.
which is a little
Well,
depressing.
yeah, well, I don't know. I think this is probably not the forum to get into the details of it, but there are opportunities if you're talking about wetlands or forests
Hmm.
or plants, or there are opportunities to do what's called restoration. So in
Hmm.
other words, you don't have to accept the fact that those 5 acres are full of invasive plants and that are
Right,
not helpful to the environment. You know, you can
right.
ideally do some restoration, so
Yeah,
to
yep,
a
yeah,
healthier environment. So.
yeah. Okay. I noticed when reading some of your articles about some of your pieces on environment, this is a weird sort of comment, but sometimes what you write about, the specific thing, is really uninviting. I mean, like snakehead fish
Mm-hmm.
or insects of
Right,
various kinds.
right.
And what draws you to, like,
Well,
I don't know anybody who wants to talk about snakehead fish, no less, you know,
mhm,
what, why, what?
yeah. Well, that's part of trying to educate people about what's in our environment and why it's important, especially insects. I mean, people swat away insects, you know,
Yep,
people don't want bugs around.
right.
Well, they're really important in the life cycle, and we couldn't function without insects and what
Mhm.
they do. And
Yes.
so I guess it's sort of an education mission. But I personally enjoy learning more about that myself, you know.
Uh-huh.
And I wish I had majored in biology and journalism, but I didn't.
Yeah. I have a friend who lives in the Georgia mountains. He's a bit of a loner mountain man.
Uh-huh.
Um, and all last summer, he was complaining that he was getting stung by these giant hornets, some sort of hornets,
Uh-huh.
and just and I can't find their nest, and and they got me, and they
Mhm,
got my here
mhm.
and there, and then a couple of weeks ago, he said, "Wow, the leaves have fallen off the trees, and I found this giant nest."
Yeah, a huge
And I
nest,
said,
yeah.
"Oh my gosh, what did you do? Did you get rid of it?" And he said, "No." He said, "They got to live too."
Yeah, that's right.
I thought, no, that's a lover of nature. you
Yeah,
know,
they have a right to
the
life.
the very thing he was cursing, a
Right,
few months ago,
right,
given the opportunity, he would not hurt them. He would not touch them. He would not destroy their home. You
right.
know, yeah, and that's a little bit of what I think you see also, or you
Mhm,
work from,
mhm,
that ethic.
mhm.
Um, what's your favorite thing to write about?
Ooh, oh, that's a good question. Well, it would definitely be a conservation issue. So,
Mhm.
uh, and I guess, I don't know again, how to get the reader interested in that. Like now I'm working
Mhm.
on an article on a tunnel. It's about a tunnel, railroad
About
tunnel,
what? A railroad tunnel.
a railroad tunnel. It's a combination of history and nature and perseverance and ingenuity, I guess, as well. But there's uh, it's called the Blue Ridge Tunnel, and it was built through the Blue Ridge Mountains near Charlottesville.
Mhm.
In I believe they started in 1858, and this is before the invention of dynamite. And the they brought this. The chief engineer was from France. He had served with Napoleon, and
Mm.
he was known as very smart mathematician. And he conceived of this project, and then they used enslaved people and Irish immigrants who were came here because of the famine in Ireland.
Mhm.
And they built this tunnel through solid rock that was almost a mile long. It's amazing.
Wow.
And now, so that is that's a like I say, that's not just sort of a pure conservation story, but there's certainly a conservation side to it because you're dealing with a mountain. And
Right. Right.
nature too, like uh, there's salamanders in there. And anyway,
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a hard question. What is my favorite topic?
You have a lot. Do you enjoy what you do?
I do, yeah. I find it to be very challenging, and
Mhm.
so I wouldn't do it if I didn't enjoy it. So.
Yeah. Um, if someone who's watching this says, "Boy, I would love to do that. I would love to write articles,"
Mm,
give them, I don't know, one,
mm,
two, three pieces of advice.
yeah. Well, I do recommend taking classes or webinars with
Yes.
experienced writers. I think that's very helpful.
Yes.
Um, I think you have to persevere. You have to accept rejection.
Mm.
Because your a lot of your pitches don't get accepted, and but you have to take that with a grain of salt and move on. And editors have their vision of their publications, and you may or may not understand that. I mean, sometimes they
Mhm.
do, and sometimes they don't.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and you have to, and often have to intuit it. It's not that they tell you. They might, but they don't
I see.
necessarily. I mean, the people, experienced people will say, if you want to write for, let's say, a magazine, you should read 3 or 4 issues of that magazine before you start. Try to get
Yeah.
into the mind of the editor.
Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah. So those are some of the tips. Yeah.
Okay. Well, great. Um, anything else that I missed that you would want to talk about being a journalist? I admire that you have made this career for
Oh,
yourself,
thank you. Thank you.
and it is not often, or it is not. I can't say it's not often, but people don't always get to do what it is they want to be doing,
Right.
you know.
That
And
right.
you've made that happen, and I
Yeah.
admire that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. Um, yeah, it's I mean, like any job, a career, there are good days and bad days. It's up and down,
Hmm.
but you have to get up in the morning and pick yourself up and face the day, and and believe in yourself,
Yeah,
and
I think the I'm a big fan of sure, if I remembered who it was, I would tell you. the Four Agreements. That book, if you know the book, The Four Agreements. Anyway, one of the agreements that you have with life, sort of, is don't take anything personally.
Yeah.
And that comes very much into play when you're in a field where your success is often, you know, at the mercy of others. In other words, your ideas, your thoughts, your dreams are someone else judges.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean it was a bad idea. It just didn't fit that publication or with that editor, you know. It might work with another one, you know, so.
Oh, Glenda, I didn't say that we have a friend in common, which is how I got in touch with you, named Susan. I almost said we have an old friend in common, but I didn't want her to think I'm calling her old.
Oh, okay. Yes, we do have a friend in common.
Yes, and probably the reason she recommended you is because we're all sort of adventurous in our lives. Susan and I and another friend rafted down the Grand Canyon for 2 weeks some years ago, when I had never been rafting in my life and didn't like camping, but there we were. And Susan and the same friend, Denise, came to Bali. When I went to Bali for a month, they came to stay with me. I was looking for just Bali meditation and peace, and they were traveling everywhere. They went over to Java. They went here. They went there. That's Susan. So
she's quite adventurous, and we've had some good adventures. Yeah.
Well, very good. Yes, I heard the most recent was at a llama farm. Are you going to write about that?
We did. We studied llamas. That was fun. No, it wasn't llamas. It's alpacas.
Oh, alpacas. Oh, right.
Alpacas. Yeah. She fell in love with the alpacas. Yeah.
Wow. Glenda, thank you so much for agreeing to be here.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm sorry I messed up at the beginning, but anyway, I'm glad we did it. So
me too. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. All right, you take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.